Good morning, and welcome, Bridge Nation, to another episode of Levels and Meds with me, your host, Jeffrey Azan. If you're just tuning in for the first time, remember you can listen to the Bridge 99 FM on the entire 99 bandwidth. That's 0.1, 0.3, 0.5, 0.7, and 0.9. You can also see what's happening in studio by heading online to thebridge99fm.com, or if you're on the move, you can download our mobile app in the Android Play Store or Apple App Store by simply searching The Bridge 99 FM, all one word. We got a killer show for you this morning here on Levels and Meds. We're going to be talking with a good friend of mine who we met through, I would say, mutual social service. And we're going to be exploring the topic, how can men contribute to the development of our children? I think it's a topic that doesn't get enough attention here in Jamaica and possibly in the world, and I think it's created room for a lot of conversation about the involvement of men as fathers, as brothers, as mentors, as teachers, etc., in the opportunities provided for children. Remember, if you want to be a part of the conversation, you can hit us up on the WhatsApp line at 876-551-5782, or you can call in on our studio line at 876-676-4996. Folks, let's jump into it. So we're really exploring this topic about male involvement in preparing our children for the future. And it seems to be something that, especially if you're listening to the international news, or more accurately, the Western news cycle, there's a whole argument about what is man and what is woman and all of that. And we're really not in for that conversation this morning. We're speaking about the traditional, the cis, the original men, fathers. How do we get involved? And it's such an interesting dynamic because very often when we think about caregivers, educators, uplifters, very often the image that immediately comes to mind is that of a woman. As one comedian put it, he was scanning his audience and he said, if you want to understand how traditional we all are, all of you who called a babysitter tonight, not one of you called a man. And so it just goes to show that when we think of protecting, uplifting, caregiving, men typically are not in the picture. However, statistics show a vast difference in that perception. For example, most children who are raised in a single parent household where they only had a mother versus only had a father. The children who grew up in the household that only had a father displayed traits such as resilience, capability to adapt, and even positive outlook similar to that of a child raised in a dual parent household, as opposed to those raised in a single parent household display single parent household where it's a mother display far more negative emotions, outlooks, and adaptations to life. So there is something statistically to be said about the involvement of men in the upbringing, the raising, and the development of our children and our future. And it's something we're going to be diving into this morning. Joining me here on Levels and Meds is a friend of mine. As I said, we met in the world of social work. I have with me Mr. Carlos Henry. I'm going to make him really take you through all his roles because it's the first time I've seen him this morning in his captain's uniform. But I know Carlos as a facilitator at the Leadership Development Program hosted by the Kingston YMCA. We've both been involved in it for close to a decade now, and we can attest to the fantastic work being done by the Kingston YMCA. So Carlos, morning, welcome to the program.
Morning to you, Jeffrey. Glad to be here.
I'm really happy you joined. Guys, Carlos jumped on at the last minute after we did the program this week, and we're going to talk about the benefits of the program in a little while. But for those who know you outside or don't know you outside of the Kingston YMCA, why don't you go ahead and tell the people exactly that, listen, I'm not a full-time worker at the YMCA. I actually do have a job. I just make time to make a difference.
Absolutely. So let's start with me being a KC old boy. Let me put that out there. All right?
The band is on his hand,
there
folks.
You go.
My technician is busting shots. The chaos has begun.
Fort is forever, my brother. All right. And I'm a customs officer by profession.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and being involved, with the program allows me to fulfill a little bit more than just being someone who works,
Right.
that kind of thing.
So,
Um,
but from that, let's just start right there. Work, people tend to not give back because work takes so much out of them. Let's just start right there. Customs is not an easy job. It doesn't even make you really accessible because you're all the way down at wharf most of the time.
That's correct. Well, the truth is that my job is very demanding, time-wise. However, I think that we all need to try our best to make a positive impact on society. It started from being at school. I've been in organizations. I was a member of the Key Club, and so on. And that experience has taught me a whole lot, that giving back is just so essential. I didn't have much. I still don't have much. But from the little that you're blessed with, it is always good to give back, because that is how you change the world, not by moving a whole building, but by one stone at a time. That is a part of my philosophy.
Moving one stone at a time. So I want us to expand on that in school, because I can't say that I followed the same route. I definitely was not the volunteer type in school. School actually, in the general sense, had very little appeal for me. So I'd love to know how school and the opportunity through Key Club offered got you into social give back.
Sure. Well, by being a part of Key Club, that was my first time that I was exposed to charity work. We had adopted a children's home. It no longer exists. It was on Lady Musgrave Road, but we used to go there, and the first time I went there, I was just in awe, because we went there, we comb the boys' hair, we trim their hair, that kind of thing. Of course, back then we were using razor and comb,
Right.
But of course we also had barbers among us, who had their share and everything. And it's just about spending time with them. And it was just amazing for me, my first time around, seeing how little could do so much. And from then, I guess the bug hit me. I've been a part of several charitable organizations since then.
As a man, do you find that when you go into these charitable organizations, sometimes maybe you get a side eye? 'Cause I've definitely found it where I walk in the room, and for me, I found that I might be the only man in the room. How do you deal with that sort of... well, first, do you feel that pressure when you walk into those organizations?
Well, it's funny you should go there, because as you saw on Saturday, I am the only man who is there. And the reality is that it is really difficult to get the men to stay, and it's so many things going through my mind, but it is really a reflection of society. In terms of men, we have that commitment problem, but some men do come and pass through, literally.
Right.
But it is really difficult getting them to stay.
Right.
I'm segueing it to a program that we have as I've said before, I'm a KC old boy and a member of the Fortis Pavilion. The Fortis Pavilion is a set of old boys, one of the old boy groups,
Okay.
right? Apart from the KCOBA. And our flagship program is mentorship. Mentorship, we have that. I know people say, boy, KC's a cult and so on and so forth. But the reality is...
You never heard me say that.
Of
Not
course
on
not.
air.
Of course not. But the reality is that in order to positively impact society, we have to start by mentoring our boys.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that for us, we have to literally be our brother's keeper. And that is all it's about. That's what it's about.
It's this word that gets thrown around a lot in the concept of mentorship. I know I go into a lot of university spaces and I have those conversations, and it's something that university students tend to be really on about these days. Will you be my mentor? How do I find a mentor? And it gives me hope that they're throwing that around, because when I went to university, that was never a topic or conversation. It was a secret of the rich to get mentorship. What exactly, when you do those mentorship sessions with, I'm assuming, the high school boys,
Absolutely.
what exactly are you trying to impart? You know, there has to be a form of measurement to say, are we being effective or are we not being effective?
Absolutely. So the program that we have in place is we do go back to our alma mater, starting with Kingston College, of course. And what we do is we try to impart those characteristics, you know, and guide the youth into a positive light. You understand? We never had much of this, as you mentioned, you know, seeing so many of the old boys, you know, coming back and so on and mentoring us to say, look, we started right where you are right now. Believe it or not, we failed just like you did. However, this is the result. So that is all it is. It's just about showing them. It's not in any big way, you know, big highfalutin way. It's just to say simply, look, focus, discipline, dedication, and that will get you where you need to be.
As you said, it is really just about spending a little time. And, you know, I would even say coming up through the life, that tends to be what men don't have to give, especially if we're looking at the traditional sense. In the traditional sense, the man worked, you left before the sun came up, you worked until the sun came down, you went home, and then you would position yourself to say, what more do you want me to do? I have provided. And I know a lot of my friends, my colleagues, my peers, that's what they understand the role of a man to be.
Right. Well, let me just say, funny you should say that, man. I shared a meme on my WhatsApp status that says, for men, those who have time don't have money, and those who have money don't have the time. And that is the reality, as you just mentioned a while ago. Those who are busy working, trying to get the bread for the family, so to speak. The reality is you really won't have much time because you're trying to ensure that your family has a particular quality, certain quality life, a certain quality lifestyle. And for those who may not have those opportunities to be able to, you know, to work or hustle or do whatever you need to do to get that, then you'll have more time on your hands, but you won't have enough bread, so to speak, to put on the table, you know. So it's really hard. It is hard to strike the balance. The children, when they're younger, they want that time. The time is really what is most important. So maybe us as men ought to try and strike a balance, because the reality is that even though, yes, they want this, they want that, when they become adults, they really and truly, I've listened to several testimonials that they really would have preferred more time instead of so many more of the things that you've tried to work hard to give them. It sounds a little ungrateful on their part, but the reality is that they really and truly would have preferred the time for you to have come to their sports day, run that dad's race, you know, be their Thanksgiving, you know, give time when they have Teachers Day, come in and maybe teach a class, and, you know, so they can be proud and say, hey, that's my dad, you know, that kind of thing. So the reality is that as men, we really and truly ought to try and find more time.
Folks, we're talking to a man who's in the streets, who's doing the social work, Sir Carlos Henry. And I think he's hit on one of the major nails about how men can make a difference in society. It's about adding more time, finding that way to add time, beginning of the day, middle of the day, end of the day. But I mean, he's been doing it for how long? You been in social work, you think? Voluntary social work.
Voluntary, boy.
A decade, 2 decades.
Just a little over 3.
A little over 3 decades. So the man knows what he's talking about, folks. We're going to have more with Carlos when we come back from a quick commercial break. Remember, if you want to be a part of the conversation on how men can make a difference to help our children, you can join us on the WhatsApp line at 876-551-5782 or call in on the studio line at 876-676-4996. Remember, Levels and Meds is not just a seminar, it's a conversation. More when we come back from a commercial break. And we're back to Levels and Meds here on the Bridge 99 FM with me, your host, Jeffrey Azan. Folks, if you're just tuning in, we've been talking to Mr. Carlos Henry, a gentleman, a customs officer. But that's just, the 9 to 5. That's what he does to pay the bills. Really and truly, at his heart of hearts, I have no other way of putting it than this man wants to see a better world. Right before the break, he shared with us that he spent a little over 3 decades trying to find ways to give back, been a part of multiple social organizations, outreach programs, developmental programs, and he's one of those men really trying to make a difference in the world. So we're going to jump right into it, Sir Carlos. And we're going to talk about where we met and what that's been like, and that's the Kingston YMCA Leadership Development Program. For those of you who don't know, the Leadership Development Program put on by the YMCA is an annual development program for teens and young adults of all walks of life. And what it does, it tries to expose, educate, and provide experiences in various elements of leadership, whether that is communication, team building, which is my specialty topic, money management, time management, and the list goes on and on. And Sir Carlos is one of the stalwart facilitators of the program. So, Carlos, go ahead. I would love for you to give the Bridge Nation your perspective of the Leadership Development Program and why is it so important.
I became involved with the program when I went there to be trained as a counselor. Back in 1988, I was a counselor then, and I became a counselor the next year after that. So, but before you be a counselor, before you become a counselor at the YMCA, you had to do a 10-week training program, which is now morphed into the Leadership Development Training Program, which is separate and apart from being trained as a counselor. Right? So you go through these 10 weeks of training, and we saw later where we could have way more impact. So instead of an individual just being trained as a counselor, we saw where the training program could be separate, and it could have more reach. So that is what happened with that program a few years ago. I got involved, like I said, from being a counselor, and I loved it. But when I started working, I was left to say, hey, how else can I still be involved? And say, hey, Mrs. Martin, Sarah Newland Martin, who died last year.
Bless her soul.
Right. God rest her soul. She was the general secretary. And she opened up the opportunities so that others who wanted to volunteer, because that's what the YMCA is about. It runs primarily, using volunteers, and the opportunity opened up so that we could come and be facilitators. I had some strong points. So from then, I kind of started being the main person to train not just the counselors at the time, but since then, train the participants of the Leadership Development Training Program. Sing-along and games is kind of my specialty, but at this time, I also throw in communication. That's my topic annually for the Leadership Development Training Program. So that's kind of how I started doing that.
And it's so interesting for me particularly, because the YMCA has a soft spot for me. A lot of people don't know it, but the YMCA was one of the first, if not the first place that gave me a speaking opportunity almost a decade ago practically to the day, because I started speaking I made a decision to start speaking in May of 2013. And so it's been almost a decade. And funnily enough, the leadership development program was one of the first presentations I ever gave. And, I haven't been able to leave it since.
Then. Well, let me just give our viewers and listeners just a brief insight in terms of the program. What it is, as Jeffrey had mentioned, is we cater to high schoolers, primarily between the ages of 15 and 20, right? Fourth to sixth formers. And what it is that we train, or we have several workshops throughout the 10 weeks to mold the leadership skills of these young people. We try to we do get professionals, or resource persons on various topics. As you mentioned, some of them team building, which is yours, and he's being a little modest, but let me tell you, people, when it comes to team building, I'm telling you, man, Jeffrey has done such an awesome job. I gave him the statistics Saturday for the first time. I gave him a response where at the end of each year, we do our evaluation, and we have about 20 topics that we have resource persons come in and speak on. And every year, sir, I'll tell you that yours is in the top three. Top three, man. So awesome job that you are doing, and I'm happy that I'm there seeing it unfold myself. But we have topics such as you mentioned, communications, team building, motivational skills, leadership in terms of characteristics of leadership. We teach them about the YMCA, the history and philosophy, and so on. There's also money management, as you mentioned, public speaking, deportment and conduct on the job, etiquette, so many. So I don't have the full list to go through all of that. But what we do is we try to develop the whole list in a holistic way. The individuals as leaders of tomorrow.
It sounds like a program that I think corporate needs to involve. Folks, if you want, you need to call the Kingston YMCA, ask for the program, and I'm sure the YMCA will be happy to work with you to bring it into your workplace, because there are a number of topics that were shared just a while ago that I know I've been called to present on, and I can testify that they are the key qualities to develop leaders, managers, authorities, and even followers to a certain extent, because a leader isn't a leader unless there's somebody following them. So it's definitely something to look into for our corporate listeners. So how do you, similar to how we spoke about the KC Old Boys program, how do you know if the program is having any success at the Kingston YMCA? Okay,
good question. So let me start by touching where we were first in terms of the at KC, our program, the mentorship program that we have there. It is such a robust program that those who, regrettably, each form does not have a mentor, right? So we do need more volunteers there as well. However, it has been shown, it has been shown where those who do have mentors, that they improve not just academically, but in behavior as well. I had a class that was, when you hear the name of the class alone, teachers, boy, they had a headache and so on. And by the end of that school year, they actually increased their average in terms of, and moved up in the ranks.
Wow.
Right. So of the 8, they were really, I think they were 7th. But they moved up to 5th position. Which was exactly, so as we said, it's not a whole building, one stone at a time.
Right.
And I've seen where several of the boys at that time, they were on academic probation. And, with the molding and so on, I've also seen, but I'm just smiling while crying at the same time, tears of joy to say, boy, that a couple of them have graduated on the dean's list.
That's amazing.
Making that honor roll. Man,
from a batch that
from
was
a batch that was just, you know,
thrown away.
literally discarded, you know, to make the honor roll. It's just an honor for me to have been involved with them at some point, you know, in their life. So it started there. Moving to the leadership development training program now, you know, it's pretty much the same thing that we do there. We have seen where, you know, Mrs. Martin, you know, when she was alive, she could tell you so many of them have come back for recommendations, because the reality is that most tertiary level institutions, they ask you if you're involved in anything,
Volunteer
you know,
programs.
volunteer program. That's exactly right. And the YMCA, especially those who go abroad, you know, she used to be bombarded with calls because, you know, when you go to universities abroad, the YMCA is known. It's an international you know, organization. Exactly. So, you know, being involved is a whole lot. Just the fact that it's on your resume, and even locally, you know, it's
opens
a big deal.
opportunities.
Exactly, it does. And the good thing is that I have been so many places, and we literally train on average of about, say, 70 people annually. It has dropped now because of COVID.
Because
and
of
so
COVID,
on, right?
yeah, we saw.
But before that, we used to go up to 100, right? So
Right.
that's why I use the average of about 70. And I'm saying, you train these young people annually, and when you go out there and you see so many professionals saying, "Hey, sir, don't you remember me? I used to be a part of that program." That for me is just so fulfilling, man. You know, seeing the fact that they have moved from the program and they're, you know, making something of themselves, you know,
And it's
positively
not,
impacting society.
And the point I want to make to that is that these are not just, what would I say? These are not just kids in all exams. They're not just kids looking to advance themselves. Some of them are actually, they're in a bit of a spot of trouble themselves. Some are sent there.
I can tell you, you're absolutely right. So even though it's marketed as the leadership development training program to hone the skills of budding leaders, right, or future leaders, there are some of them who are unofficially leaders because they lead a posse, you know, a posse in the class. So what they do is that they say, "No, man, you know what? Since you want to be a leader and you're the troublemaker, go to that program."
But
you know,
that's what my father always said, though.
Mm-hmm.
He always said, "Make sure you're the leader, even if you're the leader, the troublemakers."
At least so at least you are the leader, right?
Right.
So we do get those, and the good thing about it is that we're able to see the positive, you know, in these children and find ways to get them. It's not a miracle, you know, but we do find ways to get them to see the positive in themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are those who have come to the program, and what we do at the end of the 10 weeks, of course, that's a leadership development training program. When that ends, then summer camp training program begins. And what we have done is to take people who we see those potential in and take them out of, you know, the posse, the crew, so to speak, you know, and isolate them being a part of this elite training program for to becoming a counselor. And we've seen where it is a totally different person. You know, they've literally shown that, hey, yeah, man, I can make a positive impact as well. So sometimes it's just the opportunities, you know, as Sarah used to say, it's the opportunities that they need sometimes to show that it's not all doom and gloom for young people. You know, we believe in young people, and this is why we make the time to create such a program so that we can mold these young people's lives, so that eventually, which is the same objective we have at KC, where when you graduate, you should make a positive impact on society.
You're not going to find me disagreeing with any of those points, not one of them. there's so much that can be said from, the whole call. It's that kids really do have the power. They have the potential. Very often they're not in a situation where they're given the experience. My three things are education, experience, and exposure. And I always come back to the fact that I learned something brand new at 25 that changed the rest of my life. The last 10 years have been defined by that new piece of information I learned at 25. And at 25, I learned that there's a career called motivational speaker. And this is not that I was not educated, because I went through all the educational systems that were there. And it's not that I didn't have experience, because I had worked and I had been in networks and I had been in groups and all of that. But it was the exposure, the opening of my mind to something that, based on my environment, my circles, my upbringing, the guidance I was receiving, I wasn't exposed to something that I could dare say I was perfectly aligned to. And the fact that these programs out there are offering this level of exposure, it means that somebody else is going to figure that out earlier than I did when I figured it out at 25. Some of them are going to get exposed to something at 16, 17, 18. That's going to be like, that's the thing. I didn't know it until now.
No.
And then take it from there. So definitely a huge, well, I want to say a big thank you for, your 30 years plus of social work, because it's these small differences that really shape what the future is. And I'm one, and I'll speak plainly, I want to criticize the formal education system, but at the same time I have to appreciate that the formal education system in many ways is doing the best it can with the tools that it has. But it's, as you're saying, how do we, the people who want to see a better tomorrow, how do we get involved to help create that better tomorrow?
Okay, so I'm also a part of the Father Holong and Friends group, where we serve with our talents.
Like high schoolers, when them have the badge on the shirt, you don't need a whole sash right now. All right.
I know, right? So what we do there is we serve with our talents. So talented people, singers, actors, dancers, we get together, we put on shows, our talent for the shows, and these shows raise money to take care of the homes that are run by the missionaries of the poor, all founded by Father Holong himself, right? So that is one way in which I'm a part of that, right? People can also call in, donate their time and resources as well, because the reality is, it doesn't matter which government is in power, there's no way they can take care of all of the people that are in those homes, right? So we do need that kind of resource as well. So that is one way in which people can give their time, The other thing is that I know people are, they usually say, Casey, they put you in a room and say, I love Casey, or some, some
and the money starts to flow.
Thing. But the reality is that maybe you could take a leaf. Oral Tracy said it one time, he said, boy, the reason people hate Casey is the same reason they love Casey. Because the reality is we look out for each other. And that mantra, that being your brother's keeper, I think if more, this is what I use to kill all arguments and debates when it comes to Casey. I said, look, if more Jamaicans felt about Jamaica the way we do about Casey, wouldn't Jamaica be a better place?
Agreed. I can't argue
you
that one at all. Yeah.
That is what I used to kill all arguments when they're talking about, how it's all about us, that kind of thing. It's not all about us, but the reality is that it starts there. And when when we're mentoring the boys, we don't just say, hey, go out and,
look for your KC, brother.
No. but the point is that what we do is we encourage them to be confident and assertive out there. All right, it's not about being full of yourself. Absolutely not. What we simply want is, no matter which road you walk, no matter what you do in life, we simply want you to be the best not only at the best Casey old boy, but the best citizen of Jamaica that you can be, and make a positive impact on society. That's exactly what it's about.
You're not going to find any disagreement from me there. I mean, you are a bigger testament to it than me. And I'm just honestly, let me not play myself down, because I have a habit of playing myself down. I've been doing my part for the last 10 years. It's just him have 20 more on my 10. So he's made a bigger difference over the time span. But I'm going to catch up in time. You are also sharing with me that even customs has something right now today. Actually,
Absolutely.
you had to give up on one serving opportunity to come and serve in this capacity.
Right.
Customs is making a difference today as well.
Absolutely. We have our our corporate social responsibility team, and at this point they are at 2 schools. We chose schools that were close to our location, and they're at today's Read Across Jamaica Day. And they're at Holy Family and Edward Siaga Primary. And so I'm going to be joining them as soon as I leave here, because
Folks, he not check nobody goods today at customs. He must serve the people of Jamaica today.
Boy, I tell you, but I love children.
Yeah.
I do love children, and reading to them has become one of my passions, man. So that's one opportunity that I'll be seizing. I had seized with both hands a couple of years ago, and they haven't let me go since. Other schools have been calling me.
How does that make a difference, though? I mean, I get the concept of a parent reading to their child, say it's the end of the day, or trying to instill in your child a habit of reading. But, we talk about making a small difference in a small way, and that small difference may turn into a radical change. But what real difference do you see going into the schools and reading? Yeah.
Okay. So someone was saying that boys don't read, and that is the reality, is that boys really need to read more. So everyone learns differently.
Agreed.
You have different ways of learning, and believe it or not, you may say, hey, go study a book, but they be maybe trying to read. Not that they can't read, they read, but they're not getting it. Sometimes when you listen to a story, you actually get the essence way more than if you read it for yourself, especially for the children. So that is one way, in terms of sharing, the lesson in that story. That is one. And the other thing is that I'm hoping that, especially for the boys, when they see a man coming in and reading, that they too will say, you know what, let me read some more. Because the reality is that men don't read as much as we should.
It's true. I mean, just this morning I was scrolling on Instagram, a friend of mine celebrating her birthday, and she's on the beach, and I'm guessing with her husband. I'm not guessing. It's with her husband. But she's on the beach with a book, and he's in the water swimming. And I don't see any book in any of the pictures that would say, oh, that's his book as well. And that's not to say, he's a bad guy. I'm not saying that. But it was just the traditional.
It is traditional.
She reads, he plays kind of setup. And that seems to be the telltale. I mean, I know I didn't start reading until I started making my whole life change in my late 20s.
So in terms of knowing more about life and what our role is supposed to be, women, for example, say, but you're supposed to know that. You're the man. You're supposed to know that.
Oh.
You understand? I know it's that's going on.
Different topic for different day.
Different day, right. But the reality is, though, that we really and truly need to read more, because if we read more, we kind of would know half of the things that the women expect us to know when we assume our roles as fathers, as big brothers, as cousins, as uncles, grandfathers, and so on. So that's one of the things that I think that men really and truly need to do more of. It's usually, when it comes to the academics, it's usually, the woman will read this story or do this, do that kind of thing. You can start by reading to your own child. And it doesn't have to be your child. It could be your nephew too. It could be a little cousin, and so on and so forth. But as men, we really and truly need to read more and set that example for the little boys.
You're not going to find any disagreement with me there. Folks, we're really diving into all of the elements that are available to you, to us, to the men out there. Plenty volunteer opportunities to help impact change and mold Jamaica. Folks, I'm full, like my heart feel full, like I want to encourage everybody. If you could actually see in studio, and you can if you go to thebridge99fm.com, but you see in studio, there's a sense of giddiness about me, because what Carlos is saying is something I've been preaching and trying to live for a long while, is that there are many opportunities for us out there to make a difference. And it really is about making a small change, because the small change we make today becomes a radical difference tomorrow. We have so much to talk about it, but guess what? We have to take a quick commercial break. We're going to take this break, and when we come back, we're going to be closing off this topic on how can men make a difference in the lives of children. That and, well, just that when we come back from break. And we're back to the Levels and Meds on the Bridge 99 FM with me, your host, Jeffrey Azan. Folks, if you're just tuning in, we've been speaking with Mr. Carlos Henry, Customs Officer by day, social worker, every other second available to him. If you're just tuning in for the first time, remember you can check out the Bridge 99 on the entire 99 bandwidth. That's 0.1, 0.3, 0.5, 0.7, and 0.9. If you want to see what's happening in studio, you can check us out online at thebridge99fm.com. And if you're on the move and want to know what's happening on the bridge, you can download our mobile app in the Android Play Store, Apple App Store, by simply searching The Bridge 99 FM, all one word. Before we close out the program, I also have to give a big shout out to the show coming up next, Timeline Show with DJ Phil. Always bringing a vibe and an energy. People want to get on. The businesses are calling, talking to some interesting people. So remember, when we finish with Levels and Meds, don't go anywhere, because Timeline Show coming up, and I know DJ Phil has a whole host of people to talk to, energy to share, and excitement to give. With all of that said, we're going to be jumping up or closing out this conversation with Sir Carl. I like calling him Sir Carlos Henry. I feel like he's a gentleman. Sir Carlos, we've been talking about what we can do, and we identified some key things. So we definitely spoke to the fact that time, as men who want to make a difference, it's time is a major resource that the children want, that makes a big difference. And as you said, even as men who provide things in the testimonials that you've spoke or the testimonials you've received, as much as they appreciate the things, a lot of the time children wish they got the time. So time is a big give back where men can make a difference. And then we went on to speak about a number of volunteer opportunities where men can give back. You, in your journey, you identified, the KC Old Boys. And I'm putting some pressure on the Bridge KC fam, because them like to tell us how them are KC and da-da-da-da. So I'm showing some pressure on them to get involved in giving back through that mentorship program. And I only do this because I actually trust them. There are some bright gentlemen here at the Bridge, and I think the kids at KC would benefit hugely from them giving back. Both of us gave back through the Kingston YMCA ongoing program, and the YMCA is always open to receiving support and help through volunteerism or resources. And then you also do work with the Mustard Seed,
Missionaries of the
Poor, through Father Holland,
friends,
who they can always use the volunteerism and support. So there's several opportunities out there to give back. Now that I've finished my rant, trying to engage the Bridge Nation to go and give their time and join these organizations, Carlos, I really want you to talk about how has giving back affected you? Because as we give, so do we create room to receive. And as a man who's been on this journey for the last 3 decades, I think you are more than equipped to share with the nation the benefits or the receiving that happened to you from the giving back that you do.
Oh, absolutely. It started with being a counselor myself. And I saw the first year that I was a counselor, believe it or not, in doing so, even though for me at the time it was just a summer job, and we didn't get pay. You got a stipend, right? Still so, but I mean, it's more the experience than anything else, right? The first thing that happened to me as a counselor, which kind of opened my eyes and let me realize that what you're doing is not just a little summer job that you're just doing and you're getting experience and you're getting a little stipend and then that's it, right? The first thing is that what happened the first year for me, I went to, back then it was a cinema. I went to a cinema at the time, and one of the campers was upstairs, and then I heard him shout my name, Carlos, and then call his mother and say, "Mommy, see my counselor there." It was a wake up call for me at that time to say, look, you can't just be you anymore, because the reality is that even though for so many of us, we think that we're just one person in the world, there are so many people who, to them, you are the world. So the reality is that it starts with us, and it made me realize that I needed to set a better example, using my own life as a testimonial, so to speak. So I realized then that, I used to give a whole lot of trouble on the road. I'm not denying that, But I mean, it made me, shape up, so to speak, that kind of thing. So it allowed me to do that self-assessment and recognize that now, because as a little teenage boy, right? So now that you're impacting lives, the fact that that child, that camper, that moment, that camper said, look, Mommy, that's my counselor. Proud of the fact that, I'm impacting their life. That was a complete turnaround for me. I wasn't a bad boy, Mark,
right.
Not at all. But, so that was the first step, or the first rung on the ladder for me in doing my sing-along on games that I do annually. Seeing some of the students, some of the participants, I remember very shortly afterwards, a couple of them said, look, we're going into the hotel, industry, and we're going to be playmakers and using some of the stuff that you have, given, some of the stuff that you've taught us. And I'm seeing it, that they did. And there are some of the better players, man, that is just so fulfilling for me. Going, like I said, into corporate worlds and seeing even those employees and saying that when they have socials and so on, they're the ones who they call on to say, hey, come and do an icebreaker here, an icebreaker there, or when they have training, that kind of thing. It really and truly, does a whole lot for me to know that I've, directly, positively impacted them. And so many of the past participants of the program have said, look, the exposure, as you mentioned, the exposure that the program has given me has really and truly allowed me to be able to do that self-assessment and realize that they can be way more than they thought they could have been before. So those things for me,
worth it.
Well worth it. I feel that sense of satisfaction from seeing others thrive, from seeing just others who may be feeling dejected before, or just not think that they could be way more than they really are or than they thought at that time. That for me is very satisfactory.
Folks, you heard it here from a man who's walked the walk. We're just going to, I know I'm co-signing what Carlos has said. We're encouraging you, get involved. Men, any of the men out there in the Bridge Nation listening to us, get involved, whether it's going to be at your alma mater, whether it's going to be at your workplace, like with the customs having their taking part in Reading Day or Read Across Jamaica, whether it's going to be with religious organizations. But telling you, men, a little bit of time, a little bit of change can create a radical difference in the world. And I know I'm speaking for Carlos and myself here when we say we're encouraging you, especially this May, this Child's Month, to go out and make a difference. Carlos, thank you so much for joining us on Levels and Meds.
My pleasure, man. Trust me, my pleasure.
Folks, you've been tuned into Levels and Meds here on the Bridge 99 FM with me, your host, Jeffrey Azan. Coming up next is a timeline show. We're going to be leaving you with a little tune to set the mood or close off the mood of today's topic of how can men make a difference. A little track that a lot of people didn't expect it when it came out, and it still resonates with many of us today. Big thank you to my engineer, Sir Kevin, locking it in. Kevin Akesi, old boy, so I'm going to pressure him now to get on the mentorship program. And thank you to the Bridge Nation for staying tuned. I'll see you next week here on Levels and Meds at 10 a.m. every Tuesday. Have a great day. Don't stop leveling up.